Good morning, everyone. Hope you've enjoyed this nice fall weather we've had. It looks like it's coming to a close. So I think this is the first July that was out on the 4th, and I was actually chilly sitting out watching fireworks. Most of the time it's just hot and miserable or it rains. So we have definitely been blessed with the weather that we've had. And this morning I want to talk and focus on the fact that love is everything. And you think about your Christian life. Can we truly be all we can be for God if we don't have love in our hearts? What was Christ? Christ was the ultimate example of love. God was the ultimate example of love. And I find today, in our society, it seems like that love is just getting further and further and further away. And we see more and more hatred toward our fellow man. It even comes into the church. In our bigger cities. And it seems like every time you turn on the news, their murder rate gets higher and higher. The crime rates are getting higher and higher. And when you look at this, it all goes back to love. It all goes back to a condition of the heart. Well, Paul addressed this in Corinthians, in chapter 13, verses 1 through 13. He would address, well, Corinthians, the church there at Corinth, really needed a lot of love. I mean, there was a lot of things going on with this church. A lot of things going on in that area. Like I said, this was probably of the cities there around that the ministry went to, it was probably one of the most corrupt of any of the things that was just going on. I mean, like I said, it was so bad it had a disease even named after it. Because there's so much sexual immorality that was going on there in Corinth. So it was just an awful place to be. But, Paul seen the need to take the ministry to there. And he's addressing the church here, and he's going in to talk about the love. But it says in verses 1 through 13, here again, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, it says, "If I speak with tongues of men and of angels, but I do not have love, I have become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and know all the mysteries and all the knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove the mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all my possessions to feed the poor, and if I surrender my body to be burned, but I do not have love, it profits me nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind, and is not jealous. Love does not brag, and is not arrogant. Does not act unbecomingly. It does not seek its own. Is not provoked, does not take into the account of wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails, but if there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away. If there are tongues, they will cease. If there is knowledge, it will be done away. For we know in part that we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away with. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. When I became a man, I did away with childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, just as I also have been fully known. But now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love." So Paul's saying here, did you ever know there was so much about love? I'm not guilty. Love is just love. It's just something you feel. But I really never thought about, the attributes of love and what Paul would bring out here in this chapter. He talks about all these things, all these spiritual gifts, they're going away. These tongues and this knowledge and all these things, it can all pass away. And it does pass away. It did pass away because the Scripture was fulfilled. The purpose of them was fulfilled. So all these things passed away, but love never did. And Paul addressed that here. In verses 1 through 3, Paul tells us of the necessity of love. In verses 4 through 7, Paul would tell us the characteristics of love. In verses 8 through 13, he tells us the duration of love. And in verse 13 mentions out of faith and hope and love. Love is the greatest of all. And and I always think about that, when I'm treating somebody, how do I treat somebody? Does this person see me as nice? Does this person see me as a loving person? I mean, even when I've, been done wrong, I still try to do that. Even like, I guess my dad, he was a very impatient man when we'd go places. And I always wondered what was the example that we left when we walked out of these places. Because, we'd go to, he bought a tractor, and I remember we walked into the place, there was probably about 15 people in line, and he just cuts to the very front one and walks in front of everybody. And he would do this all the time, and I'd be like, oh no, I can't do this. But he would, and he said, well, I spent $40,000 on a tractor, I expect to be first in line and this and that. But, then, as his life went on and more he got involved in church, you seen the attitude really change to a more loving and more patient attitude. And when we're around people, we have to think of things like that. What is the lasting impression that I leave? If I can talk to somebody for 10 minutes, regardless of how hateful they are or how difficult they are, if I can spend that 10 minutes of my time and bite my tongue and just address myself in a loving manner, you never know what kind of impression that's going to leave on that person. And I think our attitude has to be that. Let's focus here on the sections here. The necessity of love. Well, he says, if I speak with tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I become noisy clanging cymbal or a clanging cymbal. What does that mean? I can tell you I love all day long. But what about my actions? If my actions doesn't back up what I'm telling you, and all I'm doing is just speaking to be speaking? Absolutely. If I have the gift of prophecy and know all the mysteries and all knowledge, if I have all faith, so as to remove mountains, but I do not have love, I'm nothing. And if I give all my possessions to feed the poor, and if I surrender my body to be burned, but do not have love, it profits me nothing. It's just done in vain. It's done to be seen. And sad to say, there's preachers like that. There's preachers that's up preaching in the pulpits every Sunday that's preaching just strictly as a job. I'd say I went to school with a couple. Their whole desire was they went into the ministry strictly for the money. And you see that. It's not every preacher gets in the pulpit. It's not up for, as far as up here, just to preach the gospel. There is many preachers that go into this just strictly as a profession. And I've met several of those going through the school systems and stuff that I was around. But Paul explained the right way to exercise all spiritual gifts. Higher than all the gifts of the spirits is the grace of heavenly love. Paul declared that even the most spectacular manifestations of the gifts, even tongues, which is just language, or prophecy, means nothing unless it's motivated by love. Christians may be talented, gifted, devoted, generous in their giving, or even endowed with mountain-moving faith. But if it is for no value, if love is not present, I can come up with the greatest sermons that ever was. And if I didn't love the congregation, love the people I was speaking to, it wouldn't be worth a dime. And I tell you, when I'm doing these lessons, there's a lot of love goes into it. I learn a lot, and like I said, I do these looking in a mirror and see areas in my life I need to improve. But that's why I preach. Because I do love people. I love to try to change people's lives. See what Christ can do to a life. But it all starts out with love. And I think when people see that love, you start to see congregations grow. When you have people comes in to visit a church and everybody's in strife and everybody cannot get along, that church is not going to be there very long. It'll just dwindle out. And we've got to get back to the biblical love. Paul applied this grand truth to the Corinth church by exhorting them to follow the way of love. Leviticus 19:16 and 18. It says, you shall not go about as slanderer among your people, and you are not to act against the life of your neighbor. I am the Lord your God. You shall not hate your fellow countrymen in your heart. You may surely reprove your neighbor, but shall not incur sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. And when I read that, I thought to myself, what right do I have to slander anybody's name? I have no right to slander anybody. If the Bible says we're to lift each other up, and it basically goes back like my mother used to say, if you can't say something good about somebody, don't say nothing at all. But when I read this in Leviticus, and I told you, I was really surprised because I had always heard love God, love others, but I never really thought about it being in Leviticus. And I thought, I ought to post this on my wall about slandering people because I don't have that right. My right is to lift you up. My right is to encourage you, to realize that you make mistakes, I make mistakes, my neighbor makes mistakes, my employer makes a mistake. We all make mistakes. And I make mistakes too. But it still does not give me the right to destroy another man's life and to talk about him behind his back to people and destroy his character. Not even God does that. Not even God destroys our character, so what right would I have to do that? That just really struck me hard. It really did. It made me really sit down and examine my life. And we'll see here in a minute about this mirror that Paul talks about. Let's read what Jesus said. That was what God said about us slandering people. And here's what Christ said about it. You have heard it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Is it easy to love your kids? Absolutely, they're your own. Is it easy to love your grandparents? Absolutely, they're your own. But he says, do not even the tax collectors do the same? They love after their own. It's easy to love somebody who's going to love you back. But it's hard to love somebody you know that, in our terms, hates our guts. It's hard to show kindness to that person. It's hard to love that person. But yet, Christ said that we are to love the person because that's true love. Now you're showing Christian love. When somebody's done you wrong, and I've seen so many divisions where people refuse to talk to each other because this person done me wrong, that person done me wrong, well, I ain't going to speak to them again. They ain't going to come to me and apologize to me. If they're not going to come to me and talk to me, I'm not going to go over and talk to them. Well, what does that do? That is nothing but pride. And that's when you walk up to that person. I don't care if they don't wave back. I don't care if they don't shake your hand. I don't care if they don't speak to you. I throw my hand up. I wave at the person. I speak to the person. I don't care if they turn around and walk off. I'm speaking the truth. I done this to a guy that I worked with one time who's a brother in Christ, and he thought I'd hit him in the neck with a rock out of my vehicle, and my vehicle was probably 200 foot from this guy, and it was spinning, and these guys just pushed me out, and a rock blew my tire and struck him in the neck. And the guy just dropped on the ground. We just thought it was funny. We didn't know what happened to him. And he didn't speak to me for 2 years. Him or his family, his wife, everybody thought I'd done this on purpose. But every time I seen him, I'd walk up and I'd shake his hand. Whenever I'd seen him, I'd just be kind to him, and I knew that he was still mad at me, this and that. And now, we're good friends. I see him now, he comes up and speaks to me because I was waiting to talk to him. But I could have had that attitude to just cross my arms and say, well, he should have known the truth about it. That's just stupid. He should have known better. But that wouldn't have solved anything. We still wouldn't be friends today if that was the case. It's time, we have to grow up. We're adults. I see so many adults that we have to be looking at our children and seeing their love. There's things that we can learn. We've got to grow up and be adults sometimes and set the example. Now let's look at the characteristics of love. Love is patient. Love is kind and is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant. Does not act unbecomingly. It does not seek its own. Is not provoked. Does not take into account a wrong suffered. does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Well, you see the first characteristic, love. Love is patient. Patience is a quality of love that the New Testament frequently mentions. By this or closely related terminology, it signifies forbearance, slowness to repay for all offenses. That means when somebody does you wrong, you bite your tongue sometimes. God is patient because He does not immediately punish those who offend Him. What would happen in the Old Testament sometimes when you broke one of the laws of God? Was justice not pretty swift? A lot of times they were stoned pretty immediately. Well, God's patience slows down the judgment process and opens the way for reprieve, for punishment altogether. He offers us mercy. He offers us grace. He's very slow to anger. Believers should behave similar because their love for one another. Love is kind. The term kindness appears many times in Paul's epistle. It is connected with the patience again in Galatians 5:22. Apparently because the concepts are familiar. But listen to it. It says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. You notice how it brings self-control in there. A lot of times our tongues is because we don't use self-control. Gosh, this thing's going crazy. Patience is more temporal focused, while kindness refers to the manner in which a person treats others. Kindness takes many forms. In general, it is soft and gentle. Occasionally, however, kindness must take the form of a careful rebuke designed to bring about a good result. Do we have to be hateful sometimes when somebody's done us wrong, or even to our children if they've done something wrong? Do we have to be just hateful to get the point across, or we can do it in a gentle manner? You know, I always try to tell my kids, you know, when it comes to the role they put on the parent role, I put on the parent role. For the most part, we're just friends. And I treated my son and my daughter like that. And, you know, and I told them, I said, I always want you to be comfortable to come to me and talk to me about anything. I said, I don't want you to ever look at me as a parent that you cannot talk to. And my kids was very open. I mean, there was very few times I ever had to step in as the parent. I wanted to be known as their best friend. And that was the role that I chose to take. And I think my kids will tell you today that that's what I was to them. Kindness takes many forms. In general, it is a soft and gentle. Okay, just read that. Paul demonstrates that as he dealt kindly but firmly with the Corinthians. Why did he deal with a son that was sleeping with his father's wife or stepwife? I mean, he dealt kindly with him. There was a time to reprove him, but he, in 2 Corinthians, he said, okay, the punishment's been done. It's time to love him. It's time to welcome him into the family now. I mean, evidently the problem had taken care of itself. The thing about this is we don't have all the letters to the Corinthian church. So we have 2 of them, but there could have been as many as 5 that was written, but we only have records of 2. We know for sure that there's 1 missing that we don't have. So we just don't have all the letters that was written to that church. But Jesus' own life demonstrated such kindness. Love is not jealous. One may admire another for something that a person is or has, and he may desire many of the same good things for himself. Jealousy and envy begin with an admiration, and desire turn to resentment of others for what they have. They are the roots of many terrible actions in the world. The Bible illustrates this time and time again of what jealousy can bring to us and what it does. It destroys families. It can destroy... What can jealousy not destroy? You know, you can try what we call keep up with the Joneses till you run yourself broken and dead, and you still don't keep up with them. Envy is not to display the love of Christ who gave up all for the sake of others. Love is not arrogant. The meaning seems to be bragging without foundation. May also encompass sinful acts. At the same time, loving other people does not mean failing to acknowledge the good God has done in oneself or others. I mean, we can't have an arrogant attitude. Paul was not beyond complimenting the Corinthians. He even asserted his own standing on occasion. Love does not mean lying about human accomplishments. Rather, it means not exalting ourselves over others as if our accomplishments were based on our own merits and abilities. You know, it's like you come up and you say, well, I've done this. Now, well, let me tell you what I did. I taught that. You know, you go fishing and you tell me about, you know, all these big fish you catch. I say, well, you know, yours is that big, but mine was. I met people like that. No matter what you do, there's always bigger and better. But that's not a characteristic of love. You know, there's times we can look and we see that Paul loved the Corinth church, that Paul even cried. I mean, he was very touched by the church, you know. Love does not act unbecomingly or rude. The definition of rude varies from culture to culture. At the heart of rudeness is a disregard for the social customs that others have adopted. When one does not have concern himself with when one does not concern himself with the likes and dislikes of others, he shows disrespect for them. Proper regard, on the other hand, indicates love for other people. And you know, if I had one part of my life that I can tell you that I can be, sometimes I can be very rude. And I never mean to be, but a lot of times it deals if how bad I'm hurting. If I'm hurting real bad, I'm usually very short. I don't speak. I'm just in a mood. I just want to be left alone. And sometimes, you know, I understand people can take me as being rude and things that I really never mean to be. You know, it's an area. Like I said, we all see areas that need to work on. I mean, if you notice me every morning when I come into church every morning, you know, I'm not a big greeter. I don't know. I mean, it's just I'm so focused on my sermon and this and that, and so I'm usually, you know, I'm just not. I don't know why. And I tell myself every Sunday, I'm not going to do that. Because I know that's very rude. I should go around and be. But, you know, and it's not that I try to be. It's just a part of me. It's just I come in, I'm so focused on this and that. I'm trying to remember everything. And so, I mean, there's acts of this. Everything about us, when you read the Bible, if you can't find areas that you need to improve, there's danger. I mean, there really is. So I can tell you, if I'm not greeting you in the morning and shaking your hand, I'm really not trying to be rude. It's just, I've got something on my mind and I'm sitting here trying to think. And I mean, this mind is, it's out there. So it takes focus to get these lessons on track. But love does not seek its own. Paul probably had in mind here the practice of always putting oneself in first place without due consideration to others. Many situations life call upon Christians to choose between the benefit of themselves and to others. Can I know another person's intentions? No. Can I know his heart? No. So when that person comes in who's crawling under my skin, that's when sometimes I just have to be patient and be nice to that person. And understand I don't really know what they're going through. I'm not in their shoes. And I have to always put them first. The loving person puts the benefit of others over his or her good. Nevertheless, love does not always require a person to go along with the crowd. When the customs of a culture contradict the higher ideals of the Christian faith, it is not unloving to break the social mores. I mean, if everybody is going to a bar on Friday night, does that mean because I love I need to go to that bar with them? No. There comes a time you have to stand with the gospel. And love has nothing to do with it. You show more love by not going than you do if you win. In fact, it may actually show Christ-like love to break with such cultural norms. Love is not provoked. Those who love others do not normally become irritated or angry whenever others do wrong, but rather are slow to anger. They are patient. Still, there are times when anger is appropriate. Paul himself became angry when he saw the idols of Athens in Acts 17:6. Even Jesus became angry when he saw people's hardness of the heart in Mark 3:5. And the money changers in the temple in John chapter 2, verses 14 through 17. There is times to be angry. You know, anger is healthy sometimes, but there's still ways that you conduct it. You channel that anger. You channel it, and then you let it be gone. Be done with it. Love does not take into the account of wrong suffered. People who love others do not keep meticulous records of offenses. That just drives me absolutely crazy. There's people, if somebody does them wrong, for 20 years afterwards, they can tell you everything that person did wrong to them. And they never let it go. Is there anything in your life you can do to go back and change that? Nothing. So why would you hold it? You think that person's losing sleep over it, that you're holding it against? No. No. Listen, I was taken to the elders of a church, and the person kept a list of everything that they had thought I had done wrong. In church, out of church. I don't even know. I didn't even get to see the list. I just knew the list existed because the elders told me there was a list. Now, I hate to know that somebody has examined my life that close if they had to write down a list of all the things I've done wrong in my life. That's not Christian. We all make mistakes. We all do. We're all human. But forgiveness, they offer forgiveness time and time again. Both Jesus in Luke 23:34 and Stephen in Acts 7:6 demonstrated his type of love by forgiving the people who put them to death. Here was two innocent people who died asking for God to forgive them. Forgive those who was committing the act. Love does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with truth. In other words, those who truly love do not enjoy seeing their loved ones stumble into evil. They rejoice when their loved ones tries to live according to the truth of the gospel. Sin destroys people's lives, so to rejoice in their sin is to rejoice in their destruction. You know, I've seen people that go along with anything. You know, and they think, well, if I say something against that and what they're doing, they're not going to like me. If you're doing something against the gospel, and you see the person doing something against the gospel, you're not showing them love if you're going along with it. And you're supporting them in it. There has to be a ground of truth that we have to stand on. That's love. Love bears all things. The word can mean to endure, to cover, protect. If Paul had in mind the concept of endurance, he meant that love bears with many offenses and does not stop loving even under the strain or difficulties imposed by others, even going as far as to love your enemies. Love handles the sins of others in ways that will bring exposure or shame. Love believes all things, is trust. Perhaps the characteristic of love is best expressed in contemporary English idiom. Love gives the benefit of the doubt. Suspicious and doubt toward others do not indicate affection or love. On the contrary, when someone loves with Christ-like love, he entrusts him to the person he loves time and again. Still, love does not demand that a person trust even when the basis for trust has been destroyed. If somebody does you wrong, it doesn't mean I don't love them if I'm going to send my car there again to have it worked on, just to have it messed up again. But it still doesn't give me the right to slander the person. It just gives me the right to go somewhere else. Love hopes in all things. Loving someone requires maintaining a measure of optimism on the person's behalf. Hope is an attitude of goodwill eventually come to those who may now be failing. Failure invades every Christian's life. It often causes others to give up on the one who fails. Yet Christians who love continue to hope for the best. If you love, you've always got a future you're looking out at. But if all the world ever sees is you give it up, and all the world sees is you mumbling and grumbling, where do they see the love? They don't. Do you think they want what you have? They think they want it. They say, well, this person claims they're Christians. Why do I want what they got? They're the most miserable person that ever was. That's the attitude you send forward. Did you see going to buy a car? If you walked in and a car salesman told you how bad every single car was on the lot, how many cars would he sell? None. Love endures all things. Loving someone is easy when the other person does not challenge one's affections by offending or failing. Love's quality becomes evident when it must endure trials. The New Testament encourages Christians to preserve their Christian walks in 1 John 5, 2 through 5. Here Paul had in mind in particular the need of preserving the love for others. Christians should look at the length and the perseverance of Christ's love as the standard of their own. The duration of love in 1 Corinthians 13, 8 through 13 says, love never fails, but there are gifts of prophecy. They will be done away with, or done away. If there are tongues, they will cease. If there is knowledge, it will be done away. For we know in part that we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away with. Of these is love. For now we see in a mirror dimly. There's a reason for this mirror being mentioned here in Corinth. But then face to face, now I know in part, but then I will know fully, just as I also have been fully known. But now faith, hope, and love abides in these three, but the greatest of these is love. So how long does this love last? Well, the second analogy involves the experience of looking at a poor reflection in a mirror. In verse 12, in Paul's day, Corinth was well known for its mirrors. Because her mirrors were made of polished brass, some interpreters have argued that Paul refers to the fact that the metal mirrors reflect one's image only imperfectly. They didn't have glass in, so they used these brass, but Corinth was very well known for their polished mirrors. But Corinth, however, made a high-quality mirror that was probably provided good reflections. More likely, Paul meant that a reflection is no substitute for a real person. And this is a mirror that they had found there at Corinth. But you think about it. How many times when you're having problems in your life, do you go and look in the mirror? I ran into a situation with a guy one time that I worked with, and he had been married and divorced several times, and he was fixing to get a divorce again for his fourth time. And he said, well, I just don't know what my wife's problem is. He said, this number 4. And I told him, I said, well, I'm just going to be brutally honest with you. I said, the first time, maybe. I said, I don't promote divorce in the first place. But I said, when it comes to number 4, I said, I think it's time that you start looking in the mirror. And I said, and it's the only way that I can tell you. I said, because you're going to sit here and tell me your side, and I said, I don't have her side. And we're still together today. But what if I'd been a friend and he said, well, just let me tell you what I do. See, it wouldn't have went well. Sometimes you have to just state the facts. And our Christian life has to be like that. What am I doing wrong? It's not what everybody's doing wrong around me. Why have I got the bad attitude? Why am I the person I am? It starts with looking in the mirror. What can I correct? What can I do to change? Have I really got the love of God in my heart? What do I need to do different? Because like I said, I went through personal counseling, went through all these things. And a bad attitude is a state of your own mind. There is no one who causes you to have a bad day. And anytime that person blames it on somebody, they're wrong. You cause your own bad day. It's your attitude. It's how you look at the problem. It's how you look at things. Love. The love of God, the Christ love in our hearts. He takes care of so many of these things. The more we become Christ-like, you find that these attitudes just kind of fade out. In verse 13, Paul spent much of his ministry emphasizing the importance of faith and love, or faith and hope. He presented faith primarily as the means by which the believer is joined to Christ and thereby receive the blessing of salvation. Hope, in turn, Paul described mainly in terms of the glories of salvation that the believers receive in heaven, including the things like the bodily resurrection. This is faith and hope. For Paul, faith and hope represented the means of obtaining the blessings of the gospel. Faith, the ultimate blessing for themselves, was the hope that they had. In this context, he placed even more value on love. While faith, hope, and love stand above all the spiritual gifts, displacing the Corinthians' favorite was prophecy, tongues, and knowledge, which he was constantly dealing with them on, the greatest of all the things that they had was love. In this statement, Paul raised a crucial question for the Corinthians. As their church struggled in its worship, especially in the practice of prophecy and tongues, what was its highest priority? Paul's position was plain. The highest virtue for them to pursue was love for one another. That has to be our highest quality here. As a Christian, that has to be my highest virtue that we pursue. It has to be that we love one another. Simple conclusion is this. What is your reflection of your cast? How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as this loving, Christ-like person? Or do you see yourself as a person that no one wants to be around? They're no fun. That's what I call them. I mean, they're just mumbles and grumbles and gripes. There's no fun in them anymore. You're around them, you're going to listen to them complain 24 hours a day. It's not Christ-like. Let me tell you something. On your worst day that you're having, there's somebody who would be blessed to be in your shoes. You live in a country that you are blessed beyond all measures. You live in a country that we just celebrated July the 4th as independence, that we're free to do anything we want to do. There's countries, if you were sitting in this building here this morning, you would lose your life when you walked out that door. You could live in a country being born to where simply because you married the wrong person, it cost you your life. But you're blessed. We don't have no right to complain in this country. I mean, really, truly, you start to think about how much we're blessed. The love of Christ is ours. It's free. But it comes in our minds to change. If you don't know Christ this morning, you don't know the love I'm speaking of. But if you drifted away, I ask you this question as Jesus asked the church in Revelation, have you forgotten your first love? Have you forgotten when you was baptized and you felt that newness and the excitement that you had in your life? And you couldn't wait to go out and share and tell everyone about this new experience you had? Have you forgotten that first love? Christ will say it can be renewed. He says you can have that love again. You can have that excitement again. But here again, it begins with you. Come as we sing.